Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, hi, this is Attican, and welcome to part 2 of our Coffee Barons playthrough. We're at the point where we're trying to get our quarterly revenue up to $1 million. So $1 million in freight revenue. That's a lot of freight. So we're going to tackle this by continuing the kind of the process we've started, which is, I guess we could call this sort of, it's mine, it's all mine. Because the strategy we're using here is we are buying these rural stations as much as possible. Then we're setting up lines so that we can ship those goods into cities, and we're bumping those up as needed to match our demand, and we're just making sure that we're making money on the rural, the farm or the mine or the factory or whatever, the farm or the mine or whatever it is out there, logging camp, whatever it is. And then we're also, of course, making money shipping those goods. That's our freight. And then whenever it makes sense, we are owning the factory as well. So what our goal is, as much as we can, to own the entire supply chain. The source of the raw material, the shipment of the raw material, the production of that raw material into a higher end product, and the shipment of that high end product out to customers. So we're trying to own the entire supply chain, basically. And so what we've done here is we've got a pretty good footprint. We've expanded out to several cities, and we're really taking advantage of, this is called Coffee Barons, and we're really taking advantage of that coffee plantation down there near Uritibe, and using that to drive a really profitable freight line on a short haul into Uritibe with coffee, and owning that coffee plantation. And as a reminder, that's because on this particular scenario, we have this special research facilities that get built in some of these coastal cities, and Uritibe happens to be one of them, and they have a constant demand for 3 coffee per week. That's a lot of coffee. So we can really make some serious money right down there where you see on the bottom of the screen doing that. Just before that, we got a cheapo bonus. We got the bonus and then we deleted everything. So we're a little cheesy, but we grabbed our money and went on our way. So now what we have to do to get that $1 million revenue is we've got to pump a lot of freight. And one of the things I'm trying to do in this playthrough is play this. It's hard for me because I'm trying to play this the way I think other people want to play this game, which is making these trunk lines and then having things go in and out of these main lines and go to your stations. And rather than having the dedicated lines that I tend to like to play or that I've done in the past. And what I'm finding is that it works great, but you have to be really diligent about how you set up the lines and really careful how you set them up and really careful that you don't overload them with trains. And the way I like to play or have played in the past with the dedicated lines, you run a dedicated line from a raw resource into a city or from a city to a city or whatever. And if nothing else can get on that line, it's hard to mess it up. And I think that's what allows me in the past to play kind of, always on fast forward and just play so fast and still be successful because you just can't mess up those dedicated lines. You can, of course, but it's much harder. But when you're trying to do stuff like this, where you're trying to run everything into consistent places, the problem is you sort of start creating your own traffic jams, and I need to work on that. If I'm going to keep playing like this, I need to work on that. Now, we do know that in the current beta version, which is 1.7, now we're playing 1.6 here. This is the production version. But in 1.7, they're coming up with that deal where a large train station or a warehouse can be upgraded so that it will automatically switch. You can set it up with automatic switches so that trains coming into those stations will pick an empty platform and go in there. Now that's going to help a lot. That's going to make a lot of this easier, because you're not going to have that deal where I've got a bunch of trains lined up coming into Sao Paulo, and it just so happens that there's one in platform 1 being repaired. The next one up in line is also going to platform 1, so now everybody behind it is waiting. That's where you get killed in this game. What it's going to do with that 1.7 is that train that's actually waiting on platform 1 wouldn't be assigned a platform anymore. It would just go to the open slot. So if one's busy, it would fire into 2, the next one would fire into 3, and you would have a much more efficient system. So that's going to help a lot. I wasn't so sure I cared about that change, because to me it just makes the game easier, and I'm not sure I want the game to be easier. It's honestly, it's pretty easy already, but for the most part. But that change, I think, is going to be a great one, and I certainly, if I don't want it, I'm in the minority, because that's the one everybody's been crying for since the game first came out. So anyway, that's coming down the road. So you can see here I'm trying to do things like set up bypasses around Sao Paulo and use common track as much as I can, and not lay so much track. A classic Attican game like this would have dedicated lines just going every which way, and the map would just look like a big bowl of spaghetti, basically. And the way it is, this is pretty neat. It's pretty organized, as best I can do, and working pretty well. But again, let's go back to buy that rural station, set up the line. So here now I'm going to come back, and I've already purchased that logging camp. Now I'm going to set up lines, and my idea was to feed 3 or 4 cities with those logs. So I'm setting up the line to go in and merge with this loop that I just built around Sao Paulo, and I'm going to use that line to feed the logs into, I think I ended up going to Curitiba, to Sao Paulo, to Uberaba, and to Contagem. I'm trying to say that correctly. My Brazilian buddy, I can't remember his username now. Sorry, but said I was doing okay on Uberaba, but I wasn't doing so great. I was calling it Contagem, I think, and I looked it up. It's Contagem. So anyway, that's the fourth one's Contagem. So now we're just setting up our line, and sorry, I have to laugh at myself. I don't know how in the world a human being could get this wrong so many times. When I'm running a line from one track up here, so I got 2 lines. I'm running out of what, from our point of view, let's call it the right track or the lower track. And I run it down there and merge it with the wrong track, so that the other line coming down isn't running to the right place. See, it's giving me a connection for the inside loop, not the outside, and I'm trying to run the outside line. So I get it wrong, and I'll fix it, and I'll get it wrong again. I don't know how a human being could mess that up so many times, but I can do it. So anyway, finally, I'll end up getting this right and setting up the merger and setting up the line going the other way, and life will be good, and we'll have a line running logs to 4 cities. Now, keep in mind, now back to our strategy, we own the logging. We can expand the logging to make the rate of profit even higher, because we've created demand in 4 cities for those logs, and we're satisfying demand in 4 cities and helping them grow, which then creates more demand. That's how this works. That's how you run your economy in this game. You kind of own the whole supply chain, and you get paid for everything. And it's really a weird thing. It's one of those kind of anomalies of the way they've done the simulation. Oh, and here, let me point out, here's my other favorite mistake. I keep forgetting to put the crosses in, and there I can't see very well. I'm thinking there's no cross, but there actually is. And usually, when you add a line like this, where your problem is right up here. There we go. Your problem is you probably forgot to put the little X or whatever, however you're doing your crossovers and you're opening up both your lanes, you probably forgot it on the one you're adding, not the ones you're going to. That just makes sense. So there, I fixed that, and now I can run my lines. So I'll run the 4 lines. And as I was saying, owning that now by creating demand in 4 cities for the logs, I'm going to make great money on the logging, which was a cheap investment, and then I can bump it up and make more money, and these things will pay for themselves rather quickly when you buy these rural stations. Some of them are a little pricey, and it takes maybe a couple of years to actually recoup all your money, but if you think about it, after that 2 years, it's just pure profit, pure absolute profit. You're just printing money at that point, and you really are bumping up the rate of how money comes into your system all the while. So that money that's coming in the increments that are slowly working up to pay for your initial investment, you use that money to build more things. So again, one of my mantras for this game is build and then build some more and then build some more. Just keep expanding. And in fact, for me, I expand till I get totally bored. That's how I play this. I expand until I just can't stand it anymore. I'm sick of the scenario, and then you'll see me kind of sit and accumulate money for a while because I'm worn out. So we're setting up the logs, feed them to 4 cities. Remember, we're trying to get $1 million in revenue. Well, now we can pump a whole bunch of trains out of that one station to 4 different cities and get revenue credit for all those logs in all those cities. So by doing this one simple thing, that little bypass around Rio, and that little short line with the train station coming up there to make that connection, we've created the opportunity to haul logs all over the place. So that's how you can kind of take minimal investment and time and turn it into a lot of profit. So keep that in mind as you're playing. Buy, make the line, deliver, and create markets. Create markets for the rural product, create markets for the end products in your cities by creating city-to-city lines or lines to warehouses or whatever, in order to make sure that you keep a market in place. You keep demand up and make sure you're the supplier. You're the supplier. Create more demand. That's what it comes down to. And here we go. Cheesy little move to get a bonus. I think that's the second time I've done it. It's shame on me. And they are fixing that. I understand that's in the works to get that fixed, so you can't just keep getting that connection bonus over and over. That really needs to be fixed. I really think the connection bonus needs to be fixed, honestly, so that you can't even demolish. If you demolish and you lose the connection, you should lose your bonus. But anyway, all right. So just cleaned up a little thing left over. Remember, we did the big deletion in the part 1 where we had that line down to Porto Alegre, and just found a little supply tower sitting out there in the middle of nowhere and cleaned that up. So now I'm going to build another bypass around that cattle farm or cattle ranch, because I want to be able to run lines. Well, again, our logs we want to run our logs directly up to Uberaba, and we don't want them tied up or going through that cattle ranch. And I will say, this kind of reminds me of one thing to watch in this one. Is another thing I do really poorly in this one is I don't manage the flow of traffic as well as I should. Again, I'll say it again. If I'm going to keep playing like this without dedicated lines, and trying to use these trunk lines and all this stuff, it's a much harder game like that, I think. I mean, that's how everybody thinks they want to play. I think it's a much harder game. And but maybe that's good. Maybe that's good. I just said I don't want it to get any easier, so maybe that's great. That I'll just have to learn how to do this right and how to build these lines so that they really work and we don't get traffic tie-ups. Because throughout this one, you'll watch, the thing that's keeping me from getting where I need to go is not the lack of setups to rural stations. It's not the fact that I'm not bringing the right things. It's the fact that the things aren't getting through quickly enough. Now, I've spent about 15 minutes now talking about how badly I played, and honestly, I didn't play badly at all. Did just fine through this. Did everything ahead of time. Everything was fine, but man, there's just so much room for improvement here for me, and maybe you guys can watch this and figure out from some of my mistakes and some of the things I do well how to improve your game. So another thing I'm finding is that I don't like the pass-through rural stations, and it's not that they're great if your only goal was to have full trains. So if your goal is to have full trains, you have a city-to-city line, like in this case from Rio de Janeiro up to Contagia, and that line will pick up passengers, mail, manufactured goods that are needed in the other city, and take off. And then if it's not full, when it stops at the corn there in Moore Manor, it'll pick up some corn, fill itself up, top itself off, if you will, and always go in full to the other station. That's great. Full trains are one of the keys to making money. However, when you have a line like this that's running through a critical resource like corn is one of the fundamental growing blocks of building blocks of the city. It's also needed for the chicha, which is our South American version of beer, what I'm calling beer. So you need it for the beer, you need it for city growth, and as these cities grow, your line gets filled up with passengers and mail. That means you're carrying less and less corn, and you're not doing a good job of supplying corn to fuel the city growth and to make all the freight profits you could be making, which is what we're after in this particular scenario. So what I'm doing here is kind of changing that up so that I'm getting rid of that pass-through element of the line between Rio de Janeiro and Contagia, and going to set it up and use that corn. And it's similar to the way we did the logs. I'm going to do the corn and run it to 4 cities. So here you see I'm changing up the line, taking out the Moore Manor stop, and just telling it to go directly. And you'll notice it automatically flips over and starts using the bypass, which is nice. It'll automatically use the bypass, which is what we want. So we're just going to go through here and delete the reference to Moore Manor and just keep the Contagia to Rio de Janeiro thing going. And now we've got a line, city-to-city line that'll still work and carry some goods and passengers and mail. And then we'll set up our direct corn distribution line so that we can do a more efficient job of of distributing the corn. Now, here's the case where I could have, if I'd gone just a step further, I'd do a good thing here and build a bypass around Contagia so we can get that stuff over to Uberaba easily and without having to mess with the traffic in Contagia. But if I'd gone one step further and moved that corn line back a ways and gotten it out of the flow, I think that would have been better. And I'll talk about it here in a minute. When we get to a better example, I'll show you what I mean. In fact, there's a great one with milk way down the line here. There's a great example with milk up the coast. I'll talk about it then. That's a good one. That's a good lesson learned. And I knew I was messing it up when I did it. I absolutely knew it. And I said, it'll be all right. And you know what? In this game, when you're saying to yourself, it'll be all right, wrong. It won't. If you're doing something and you look at it and say, that's not perfect, man, you need to just keep going, keep at it till you get it right, because it will come back and bite you. If you create the opportunity for a bottleneck, I promise you, in this game, you will get that bottleneck at some point. Now, this particular connection, I do this several times where you kind of expand out from a one or two platform to a 4-platform station. And I'm really using I'm trying to see if there's another way to do it, but I'm really using kind of an old school method. Before they made the changes and had the nice like these X junctions, you couldn't do these before, the diamonds, and even the merging between two lines was a lot more difficult when the game first came out. And after, I think it was 1.5 or 1.5 I think was the change, they made some nice changes to how you merge the lines, and that really improved the game. But this technique you see me doing here, where I bump over to the first one and then go right in front of it and go over to the next one and then come down and just hug until I finally make a connection past it all, that's I call that the old school way, because that's how we had to do it prior to the changes. And I'm actually finding that old school, it works pretty well for setting up access to all 4 stations when you've expanded a station. Now, what's really, I think, better is probably to delete a little bit and then rebuild your lines so that they go in with whatever junction you've settled on to use. Now, I'm using that super simple short junction, which basically takes tracks 1 and 4 and merges them quickly into the middle 2 tracks, and then you put the X right in front of that out away from the station, and that gives you access to all 4 lanes. I'm using that pretty consistently throughout this, but occasionally, when you start out with a small station or a regular size station, you want to expand, you got to do something to build it up. All right, so here we go. We're making another bypass. This is around Rio, and again, that's to facilitate the movement of this corn. So kind of taking that tactic of grab a rural station and send it off to 4 cities, the 4 best cities it can hit. Now, this is a good example of the trade-off, kind of that dedicated line versus, trying to reuse your track as much as you can. And here you'll notice now we now have the ability to take that corn to 3 or 4 cities, and all we had to build was a little bypass around the corn station where we had that pass-through, kind of the ill-fated pass-through station, and build a little bypass around Contagé, so we can easily get past it to Uberaba without having to go through the station and tying up traffic. And another same thing at Rio, another little bypass down there, and now we can take our corn into Sao Paulo without having to mess with the traffic in Rio. So that's a very small amount of track, and if you were using dedicated lines coming off that corn, there would be 4 long sets of double tracks that you would have to build to do that. So from a cost savings, obviously this is the better approach. Now, from a traffic control point of view, again, it takes a lot of diligence to get it right. And again, I'm going to say I'm not going to miss all this assigning these trains to platforms. That is a pain. So amen. Let's get 1.7 out here. Okay. So now we're setting up corn to go, and there you go. See, I've got a little traffic jam down there in Sao Paulo. That shouldn't happen. That's just poor design on my part. It's possible, you can run too many trains, but really it doesn't matter how many trains you have if your traffic flow is correct. And usually what I find is I tend to do stuff like this. I tend to do stuff like merging too many lines in too tight a space and having them where they have to go across one another so that a train waiting is going to stop a train from crossing. And then I also, seems like I always end up with the stupid, I always put a supply tower in the wrong place. I put it right where it shouldn't be. It's right there holding up all the traffic. So one lesson learned for me is make these a little cleaner. Keep the merges farther apart and be very cognizant of where lines have to cross one another. Give them plenty of space, at least a train length of space. And don't put so many signals or supply towers in that tight area. leave it more open so that the trains have to look ahead a reasonable distance before they move through. Now, you would think that would slow you down, but it actually speeds you up because you don't get the trains going in there and blocking everybody by stopping in an awkward spot. You kind of keep it open. So again, open it up, spread it out, and don't overdo the signals or the supply towers in that congested area. That's easy to say. We'll see if we can all get better at doing it. Some of you probably do it great if you do. I'd love for you to, show how you would handle that and show even if it's just take a screenshot of how you build your lines and some of the key things you think about. That would be really helpful for all of us. I know it would help me because I am getting tired of making this mistake. In fact, one of the reasons it's taken me so long to get these videos out here recently is I've played through this thing multiple times now because I've done it. And I say, well, that's great. I got a president, whoop-de-doo, but I didn't like what I did. It just wasn't cool. It wasn't new. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't super efficient. It was just good enough, and good enough is not good enough for me. It just isn't. So I've been trying to get it really right, and I'm finally, I'm going to show you this one. I mean, I had one right before this where I did it just fine, hit all these goals, had a bunch of warehouses. It was really cool looking. But it was slow. It was slower than Methuselah because the warehouses really slowed me down. So here I'm actually looking to see, we get these auctioneers. We can go out and buy our competitors' stuff. And it made me curious, would it be worth going down here and buying some of these industries that our competitors are feeding just to make the money off them? And I finally decided, nah, I don't want to go there because, if they cut off the supply, I've got this losing situation down there. I'm not allowed to build down there yet, or I could take the supplies down myself. So, nah, we won't mess with that. So back up here. We're getting some city growth now, and we want to put industries in whenever we can. And one of the keys to getting your city growth to work and having a system that really works is the right industry. You definitely want these early industries that everybody needs. You don't want to put an automobile factory in here or a steel mill or something that nobody needs the goods and you can't supply it anyway. You want to put the basic fundamental things that everybody needs so that you can make profit off that industry, and that industry will have customers that it can sell to make you more profit, and every time it sells to another city, it's helping supply the demand in that city and helping that city grow as well. Not to mention it's helping your city grow, the city you're built in, because that's another thing that's getting supplied. So here we're going to go out and get that llama wool, which is what our tailor needs. We just built the tailor, so now we're going to buy that farm. We already did. We bought the llama farm, and we're going to run the track in, and we're going to get paid for. Here's a good one. We're going to get paid for the llama ranch is going to make money. We're going to get paid to run the stuff, deliver it into Sao Paulo. Then our tailor is going to buy the stuff that we just got paid to ship, that's a weird thing about the mechanics of the game. We're basically paying ourselves in effect to ship this. So we're going to match up our llama production to our factory, and we're going to ship the llama wool into the factory. We're going to get, sorry, I'm beating a dead horse here, but we're going to get paid for the raw material. We're going to get paid to ship the raw material. We're going to make money creating the clothes and then selling them in the city of Rio, and we'll get paid to ship the clothes to other cities, and will help all the cities grow. So that's the whole idea here. Now here's an example of what I was talking about the track here and not having it pulled back away from the main line. Remember we had a pass through. I got rid of the pass through, but now I've got this a line. I've got a big traffic jam here, and the reason is because I've got bunch of trains coming back to the corn, and they're waiting in line for their turn to pick up corn. Well, that's blocking the bypass. It's blocking everything. So what I'm going to do is use our little Jan Jansen technique. Those trains are coming back empty. You'll see how short they are. So see now, watch them all kind of scoot up. They scoot up out of the way, and now our main line can go ahead and function. So when you build these, one of the things you want to do, I said I was going to talk about this later with the milk, but we can talk about it here as well. You want to make sure that your rural station is set back and has enough room, enough runway, so that the trains that you're going to run for that your rural station, if they come back and wait in line for their turn to fill up, to go back out, you want to make sure they get off your main line so that your main line doesn't get blocked. So that was the little problem I fixed there by setting up those little signals. Remember, they come back empty, so you can, on the return lane, you can set those signals much closer together to allow them to get up into a short area to queue up to go into the station. This is another example of kind of I knew better and I did it anyway. I set up a regular train station that has 2 platforms, but I knew I was going to go to 4 cities. It doesn't work to have 4 cities if you're going to run multiple trains to each of the cities, and you generally you need to if the line is the least bit long. And it does not work to try to run them out of 1 or 2 platforms, because you see how they're queued up there. Those guys queued up are not all necessarily waiting to get to that same place that first one is loading up. They got other places they want to go, but they can't get into the station to load. And the thing is, your station may actually have logs on it ready to go somewhere else. They just don't have logs ready to go to the city that happens to be in there blocking things up, because it has all it needs at this moment in time. So what I'm doing here is expanding out to 4. So if you're going to run a rural station to 4 different cities or to 4 warehouses or whatever, I would recommend that you have 4 platforms available and dedicate a platform to each of those cities. Now see how it's all just busted open now, and those trains were able to get in there and load up and move on their way. And we're not getting so many delays. The reason is now that each of the specific lines have their own platform to go to, and now the only way you're going to get a hold up is you're not going to get very many, but if you did, it would be because you had multiple trains from, say, the Uribe line, and they all happen to stack up behind each other and then hold up the rest of them. But the way I've got it there with that kind of longer line for 3 and 4, that's rarely going to happen. There's room for these trains to get out of the way. So now we can be loading for all 4 of our cities at the same time, much better. So keep that in mind. If you're going to 4 cities, have 4 platforms. If you're going to 2 cities, two. If you're going to a single one, then obviously that's where a small station can work. Now we're preparing to take that same tactic, that kind of feed 4 cities, if you will, idea, and with the fish that are down here between Sao Paulo and Uribe, we're going to set up the fish to go to multiple cities. And so we're setting up a passing lane or a bypass around Sao Paulo so that we can have a direct line to Rio de Janeiro for the fish. That's the purpose of this little line. And some of these bypasses are tricky to get right. This one's coming in at too tight an angle, a little too close. It needs to come off at a softer angle off the track. And then, of course, it still has to be far enough away from the city so that you aren't building your track literally through the city. So now here's one of those cases where I'm building one and you see it mismatches. I'm going on the outside, but this one was actually intentional. Sometimes these bypasses, you hook to the outside, the first lanes you come to on either end, and then in order to get them to work out right, you just delete part of the track and then hook up to the outside lane like you want, and then go in and complete your hookup to the inside. Now we've got a bypass going around Rio to the south, and that will allow us to have a straight shot into I said Rio, sorry, I meant Sao Paulo. That will give us a straight line shot into Rio, and we're going to buy this fishing village, even though it's pricey. Now, why is it so expensive? One, they cost a little more anyway, the fishing villages, but the big reason is because it's actually been making money. It has been overlanding. Well, actually, we've even been shipping a little bit of fish, but we're going to set it up now so we can fish, so we can send out large amounts of fish and bump up our freight revenue. So you notice kind of another theme of all this is, instead of trying to build dozens of stations all over the place to move this freight, we're trying to take each possible station, like each rural station, like the logs we did just to the northeast of here, or northwest of here rather, and the corn and whatever, and we're trying to get as much out of them as we can. So we're making sure we're sending them to multiple cities and shipping a lot out of each one. So and we're buying them, of course, and that way we're building up our freight revenue quickly, but we're also building up the rest of our revenue, if you will. We're equally building up our industry revenue. So our industry and freight revenue will both be strong when we finish this, and we'll be able to hit our objective and get our freight revenue up, but not at the expense of having other revenue as well. Now, what we haven't done in this one, and I don't do it really all the way through, is to do much with passengers and mail. And of course, one of the reasons is the character we're playing, Don Lorenzo, has been changed so that he really gets a 15% discount on his passenger and mail revenue. So it's not as good a business for him. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have city-to-city lines hauling passengers and mail. It just means that's not going to make as much money as your freight. And keep in mind, you're getting a bonus on your freight as well. So you really kind of want to think about being freight-centric here. And by the way, similar to the comment I made on an earlier one in this series, after they changed the characters, you could very absolutely take Don Lorenzo and play a passenger-centric style if you wanted to. You would just be, kind of pushing a rope uphill a little bit because you're getting less money for it. But that doesn't mean you couldn't do it. Doesn't mean you couldn't make great profit with it. It just means that you're just not going to make as much money. So again, now this one is better because this one is off. You notice there's a pretty long runway, if you will, going from this station where we're going to pick up the fish out to the main trunk line. And that way, that gives us the opportunity to put in enough stop signals in that the pathway up to the station to get those trains out of the way and off the trunk line. So that's what we're going to make sure we do here, and then we'll be able to ship to multiple cities from this fish station, if you will. So let's just kind of fast forward through this while this finishes off. So you can see here our little Reed Fisheries is making us about $20,000 profit per week. That's nice, and it's helping us drive up our freight. Now at this point we're going to go to a better freight train. We've got the Mikado, and we're going to get that. I really love the Berkshire as a train, but we've got some mountains here, and the Mikado with higher tractive power will do a better job. We should see faster deliveries on all of our lines, particularly any of the lines that have to deal with the inclinations. The Mikado will do a better job. So we've upgraded everybody to the Mikado, and we're still working on getting all that freight revenue up to $1 million quarter. So here we see that Uberaba has grown, and we have the opportunity to put an industry in there. So we're going to take a look around and see what's the best thing that we could put in. Now we've already put clothing in Sao Paulo, and we've got a line running to Uberaba. So we wouldn't want clothing there, but we want something we can definitely supply. So we're going to do the paper mill, and then that paper mill will create paper, which we can ultimately use to supply a publishing business somewhere else along the way. So now we should be able to, well, now we're looking at and thinking, well, okay, now we're going to need more wood into Uberaba. Now we've got wood coming from over there to the west from that one, but now that it has a wood-based industry in there, it's going to need extra wood. So rather than try to run it the long way, we're going to think about our same strategy of, okay, let's grab another logging business and let's supply some more cities with that. We're also looking right here to say, okay, I've got a paper mill in Uberaba, and I've got a news business down there, a publishing business down in Curitiba, which kind of popped up. We didn't see it coming. Unfortunately, we missed that one. And there's a news business down there, a publisher. So could we run, how hard would it be for us to run a line that would take the paper that we produce in Uberaba and deliver it to Curitiba, which would give us more profit on our factory, and of course help Curitiba grow, which is, you know, one of our key things we want. Well, we want to get that done. We want to grow the city, and we want to continue to make money, and we want a profitable factory up there. The other thing I'm looking at right here is there's a bonus over there for cocoa, and the computer has slipped in a chocolate factory over here in Contagé for us. So can we take advantage of that? And we've got sugar there. So you got sugar and cocoa right next to each other. That's the two ingredients needed to make chocolate. So that looks very promising right there. So this chocolate factory is just going to have to become ours. Just no way around it. We're going to be able to run the sugar. We've already got sugar going over there, I believe, if I'm not sadly mistaken. Yes, there is sugar going in there, and we can now add the cocoa, make money on the cocoa, and of course, can you guess what we're going to do with that cocoa plantation?
See what profitable deals can be wrapped with the transport of commodities.
And before we get there, we just hit our quarterly revenue goal with about
I give them jobs
a year to go, or
and we are able to create whole new metropolises out of nothing.
No, we didn't finish any too early, that's for sure. So now we've got new tasks, and there we've already finished one. We've already have 15 very profitable lines, and so we've got to grow Curitiba, and we've got to connect 8 cities with a population of at least 60,000. Now, as you can see, we're already well set up for that. The way we've been, just the natural way we've been playing. You know, you play the game correctly, particularly with a freight-centric model like this. you are going to grow your cities. So that's the good thing. Now we're looking to see if we could run our wood, and we're actually, this is kind of a recap. I was doing this so I could talk about a recap, kind of going through and noticing the profit that we're making on each of these industries. And you'll see that fish, even though it was very expensive, we've almost paid for it already. Everything after this will be pure profit. And of course, we're making ridiculous money on our little coffee plantation. We're over $2.5 million worth of profit from that one. We're even closing in on, well, we're lagging behind on the llama wool because that's only going to one place, but eventually it'll pay for itself. And we are making excellent money, $10,000 a week on our tailor, where they're making the clothing and shipping it out to multiple cities as well as consuming it in Sao Paulo. We made over $1 million in profit on the first thing we bought, which was that cattle ranch right there just north of Sao Paulo. So all those industries that we've purchased have been very good for us. We're making really good money on them, and they're allowing us to have a strong industry income. Tag that along with the, I'm trying to say, add that to the strong freight revenue that we have now, $1 million a quarter in freight revenue, and we've got a pretty strong economy going here that can serve us well to hit these next tasks, which are heavy-duty city building, and we'll get into that, of course, in our next video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.